Ciao, everyone, and welcome back to Growth Talks. I am Raffaele Gaito, your host, and my guest today is Nir Eyal. Nir, I'm like super excited. I'm a big fan.
Thank
I'm
you.
super excited to having you here, and thanks for your time. It's an honor for real.
Oh,
Thanks for
my
your time.
pleasure. Thanks so much for having me here. It's great to be here with you. Sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone there. Bad example of not turning off external
Yeah.
triggers because we started early. So we started it early. So now I forgot to turn them off.
Yeah. I mean, this is the perfect way to start this interview, isn't it?
Exactly. It's true. Wait, let me hit do not disturb. Okay, great. Because now it's officially 8 p.m. on the dot. So
Nice. So you told me you are in Singapore right now, right?
yes, in
Okay. Oh,
Singapore.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. Thanks for your time. So I can see your books on the back of your screen. For people who are not watching the video, there are the two great book, Hooked and
Thank
Indestructible.
you.
I have Indestructible here. I'm a huge fan of both your books. I have both books in Italian and English. Don't ask me why. But
How's
I
the
love.
translation? I always wondered
Uh,
how the translation was.
yeah, that's why I also bought the English version. So I first bought
Mm,
the Italian version for both,
yeah.
for both books, and then I really love them. And sometimes I wonder, okay, is there something that I missed in the translation? So let's go back to
Mm,
the root. Let's go back to the
mhm.
origin. That's why I also bought the English one. Yeah, and my first question is, you brought two books that are quite, let's say, quite different. So the first one, Hooked, uh, is a book that explain how to basically build apps that can hook people in the app. And then the second book, Indistractable, is a book where you basically tell us, explain us, teach us how to get control back of our time, of our focus, and basically how to um, lose the hook of those apps. So I don't know. For me, it was like, oh wow, that's quite different. So what happened in between? Was there
Yeah.
like a, I don't know, a moment in your life? Was kind of a process?
Well, so the idea is that we can have our cake and eat it too. That
Mm.
the kind of products that we want to build habit forming behaviors around, those type of products we want to keep, right? We want more people to make the kind of products and services that build healthy habits in people's lives. So Hooked has been used by companies in every conceivable industry, from education, companies like Kahoot, to help kids form habits around getting them hooked to in classroom education, in healthcare, helping people adhere to medication or a medical device, in financial services, helping people get hooked to saving money or making money, to enterprise products, getting people hooked to being more productive at work. So there's all kinds of ways that we can use the hooked model for good. That's why I wrote the book. I didn't write the book for Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. They know this stuff. That's where I stole their methodologies from. So I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for you. I wrote it for the people listening to this show who are building the products of the future that can improve people's lives. And so that's who Hooked was for. Now, the flip side is that some products are designed to be so habit forming that we use them too much, but it's different products, right? We can get hooked to the fitness app and we can figure out how to disconnect, how to make sure that we excise distraction from our life from the things that may not serve us. So maybe the things like too much TV, too much sports, too much spectator sports, too much social media, whatever the case might be. Those are the kind of products we would want to fight distraction. So it's really about, Hooked is about building good habits, and Indistractable is about breaking bad habits.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Um, and going back to Indestructible, in your book, you say that in the future there will be two kind of persons. So the indestructible ones and the ones that are controlled by the others. What do you mean? Can you tell us more and how we can be, in the first group, the indestructible
Sure.
ones?
Yeah, so I think becoming indistractable is the skill of the century. It's really a macro skill because there is no area of your life that doesn't depend upon your ability to harness your attention, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, your career, all of these things. It doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter how capable you are. If you can't do the things you say you're going to do, you can't be your best self. And so that's why it's super important for us to learn this macro skill of how to become indistractable. It really is the skill of the century. Because if you think the world is distracting now, Just wait. It's only going to become more distracting, not less distracting. As technology becomes more pervasive and persuasive, we can expect it to also be more engaging. And so we need to be prepared for that to reap all the rewards, right? I love technology. There's so many wonderful things that technology enables. But if we're not careful, it can become a distraction, just like it always has been, right? Every new technology, whether it's the telephone to the radio to the television and now the internet, all of these technologies distracted people because the business model of all forms of media, whether it's the newspaper or the radio, doesn't matter, all media sells your attention to advertisers. That's how they make money. Does anybody not know that? So we need to be very careful about how we consume media and make sure that we are conscious of potential distractions in our lives that pull us away from becoming our best self.
And I was wondering, now that everyone is talking about, digital detox, everyone is talking about how to get our focus back, and how bad those apps are. I always wonder, okay, what's going to happen to the big, tech corporation? They spend years and a lot of money on, building those kind of business model. And now a lot of us are realizing, oh gosh, that's not good for my health. That's not good for my brain.
Mm.
Is there a future for them? You mentioned, before, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Is there a future for them, and is there a way to do, let's say, a more ethic business model?
Yeah.
Do you see a future there?
I think we typically go through this moral panic cycle around all new technologies, all right? That the biggest determinant of whether you panic about a new technology is whether it was invented in your lifetime. But all these technologies are potentially sources of distraction, right? In my generation, it was video games. When I was a kid, video games were melting our brains, and before that, it was television was melting our brains, and before that, it was the radio melting everything melts your brain. And we know that in the course of time, we figure out how to use these things. We're already starting to figure out how to use these things. That's, hey, social media at first, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. We use it all the time. And now we're saying, actually, wait a minute, there's some costs. There's a downside to that. Mostly the downside is our time and our attention. And of course, traditional media hates social media because it's competition. So Mark Zuckerberg can't say, hey, what about all the echo chambers that happens by watching too much Fox News? What about all the echo chambers that happens from listening to only one particular religion or being a member of one particular party? He can't say that. He doesn't have the forum to say that. But of course, the traditional news media, the New York Times, Fox News, the BBC, they have editorials, they have op-eds where they can criticize new media because they're in direct competition. So we need to be very honest. Any form of media is a form of potential distraction if we let it. Doesn't mean the news is bad, doesn't mean social media is bad. It's about how we use these things and to make sure that that the products serve us as opposed to us serving the products. And if we think that the social media products are going to fix it for us, or that the politicians are going to fix it for us, we're dead wrong. They're not, because there will always be distraction, because there always has been distraction. Plato talked about this 2,500 years ago, the Greek philosopher. He called it akrasia, the tendency to do things against our better interest. So people have been distracted for at least the past 2,500 years, and we will always find something to distract us unless we become indistractable. And so it's really going to be up to us. There are some exceptions, right? I think children should be protected. We should have special laws to protect children. But I think for most people, it's really going to be a personal responsibility issue.
In your book, you explain a kind of a framework. I don't know if I can call it a framework, on how to be undistractable. Can you tell us, of course, guys, buy the book, read the book, link in the description, but can you tell us, a little bit more about the framework, and, what are the main steps to become undistractable?
Sure. So it starts with understanding what is distraction, right? It's a term we toss around a lot, but what does the word actually mean? So if you want to understand what distraction is, you have to understand what distraction is not. That the opposite of distraction, if you ask most people, they'll say the opposite of distraction is focus, but that's not exactly right. The opposite of distraction is traction, right? Traction and distraction. Both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And you'll notice that both words end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards whatever it is you said you were going to do. towards your values, towards accomplishing your goals, towards becoming the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite, distraction, is any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, things that you're not doing with intent, things that move you away from your values and further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So this is really important. This isn't just semantics. This is very important because I would argue that any action can be traction or distraction based on one word. And that one word is intent. That the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. So we need to stop moralizing and medicalizing and criticizing people for having fun. There's nothing wrong with going on social media. There's nothing wrong with going on YouTube. Stop criticizing and moralizing and medicalizing these behaviors. Why is somehow going on social media morally inferior? Why is playing video games somehow worse than watching football on TV? What's the difference? Any way you want to spend your time is fine, as long as you do it according to your values and your schedule, not someone else's. So by taking an action and planning for it with intent, it becomes traction. Now, the opposite of that, and what really gets people, it's not the obvious stuff. The distractions that get us, it's not the video games, it's not the social media. We know we're distracted when we're doing that stuff. The kind of distraction that really gets us is the kind of distraction we don't even realize distracts us. So for example, for years, I would sit down at work and I would look at my to-do list and I would say, okay, I've got that big important project I have to do right now. Nothing's going to get in my way. I've got to get to work on that. Here I go. I'm going to get started right now. But first, let me check some email, right? Let me just scroll that Slack channel real quick just to see what's happening at work. Let me just make sure that, let me do those easy tasks on my to-do list real quick just to get started, get some momentum going. And what I didn't realize is that that is the most dangerous, the most pernicious form of distraction, is the kind of distraction you don't even realize is happening because you trick yourself into thinking it's not a distraction. So just because it's a work-related task, if it's not what you said you would do at that time, it is by definition a distraction. Okay, so just because it's email or another work-related task, if that's not what you said you were going to do ahead of time, that is itself a distraction. And what we tend to do is that we do the easy work. We do the fun work as opposed to the hard and important work that we have to do to move our lives and careers forward. So anything that you do not plan to do in advance is distraction. Everything that you plan to do, even the fun stuff, is traction. So we have traction, we have distraction. Now we have the triggers, the things that prompt us to action. So the first kind of trigger, there's only two. The first kind of trigger is the obvious one, the external triggers. And this is what people tend to blame when they get distracted. It's all the pings, the dings, the rings, the thing in our outside environment that can lead us towards distraction. But it turns out, studies find that external triggers only account for about 10% of our distractions. 10% of the time we get distracted, is it because something in our outside environment? Well, what's the other 90%? The other 90% of the time that we get distracted, it's because of what we call an internal trigger. What is an internal trigger? An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety, stress, these uncomfortable feelings are the source of 90% of our distractions. Because we have to realize that time management is pain management. If you don't understand that deeper reason why you are looking for escape from that discomfort, I don't care if it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, you are always going to get distracted by something or another if you don't understand that psychological reason, right? The boredom, the uncertainty, the stress, the anxiety. If you don't know how to deal with those feelings, I promise you, you will always get distracted no matter what the tool of distraction might be. So the first step to becoming indistractable is to master those internal triggers. If you don't master the internal triggers, there's over a dozen different techniques I talk about in the book Indistractable. If you don't master those internal triggers, they will become your master. The next step is to make time for traction. What you're going to do is to turn your values into time. So many of us, we talk a good game. We say, oh, we value our health, but do you plan time to exercise? Do you have a bedtime? You say, oh, we value our relationships. Okay, but do you plan time with the people you love in your life, or do you give them whatever scraps are left over? We say, oh, it's very important that I have time for creative work. Great, but is it on your calendar? Do you have that time scheduled? If you don't plan your time, somebody's going to plan it for you. In this day and age, unless you're a child or retired, you have to plan your day, because you cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. I'm going to say that again. You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So if you have a big white open calendar, shut up. What are you doing? You can't complain about Facebook being the source of distraction. What did you get distracted from? You didn't plan anything. You have to plan your time. Okay. It's that we don't live in the kind of age, unless you're retired or a child, to be a professional these days, you have to plan your day. And I mean every minute. I know people say, oh, I don't want to do that. Too bad. Suck it up. This is the way that we become indistractable. I promise you, the reason that voice in your head that says, oh, I can't do that. I want to be spontaneous. I want to let the muse tell me what to do. That voice in your head is the voice that realizes that I'm right. That if you do what I'm saying here, you will do the work that you know you need to do to move your life and career forward. So lean into that. You're stronger than that voice. You can do it. The third step is to hack back the external triggers. So this is where we start to tackle the pings, the dings, the rings. Even though it's only 10% of the time that we get distracted, it's very easy, right? This is where we talk about your phone and your computer, all the simple stuff. It is a very small part of the book. But then I dive into the other sources of external triggers that we don't usually talk about. Our kids, right? How many of us work from home and our kids are a source of distraction? What do we do then? We love them to death, but they can be very distracting from the other things we say we're going to do that time, our time. Meetings, right? Oh my God, how many stupid meetings do we have to attend that are called for no other reason than to give our boss a place to hear himself or herself think out loud, right? We attend so many stupid meetings that don't need to be called. What do we do about that? Well, we hack back all these external triggers. And then the fourth and final step is to prevent distraction with pacts. A pact is a pre-commitment. It's a firewall that we erect around ourselves to keep ourselves in the zone, to keep ourselves in traction. So it's really those four steps in concert. Of course, here I'm giving you the 30,000-foot view of 5 years of research and a 250-page book, but that's basically the four big steps. And of course, I tell you exactly how to follow these four steps. Number one, master internal triggers. Number two, make time for traction. Number three, hack back external triggers. And number four, prevent distraction with pacts. That's how anyone can become indistractable.
Wow. Let's go back to the calendar for a second. So you are basically suggesting us to actually put in our calendar some time for, I don't know, dinner with my wife, playing with my kids, or meeting my best friend, or whatever. Is that right?
Well, if you have this problem, like I did, look, I write books for me. That's the person I write books for. And I had this problem. I knew that I was capable of more. And one of the things that I hate is I hate liars. Hate liars. People who say one thing and do something else. I would never want to be called a liar. But let me be honest with you here. I was lying to myself every day. And I'm guessing that if you tuned into this episode right now, you know what I'm talking about. I would say, oh, today I'm definitely going to go exercise. And I didn't. Today I'm going to eat right, but I wouldn't. Today I'm going to spend more time with my kid and really be fully present and not check my phone. Not so much. Today I'm going to work on that big project that I've been delaying on. Okay, maybe it can wait till tomorrow. I was lying to myself every single day and making up all these excuses. And I wasn't living the kind of life I know I was capable of living. Not because I didn't know what to do, right? Everyone listening right now, we basically know what to do. Who doesn't know what to do? You want to be healthy? Got to eat right and exercise. We know. You want to be better at your job? You have to do the work. You have to work hard, and you have to do the stuff that other people don't want to do. There's no secret. We just have to do it. So the problem isn't that we don't know what to do. Heck, if you don't know what to do, Google it. All the answers are out there. The problem is that we don't know how to get out of our own way. We don't know how to stop being distracted. And so if we can do that, that is the superpower. That is the master skill that unlocks the kind of life we want. And part of that is deciding to turn your values into time, So I'm not telling you what your values should be, okay? But if one of your values is to spend time with the people you love, okay, to call your mom, to spend time with your friends, to give quality focused time to your children, that needs to be on your calendar, because you know what's going to happen if it's not? They're going to get what scraps of time are left over after all the other stuff happens in your life. You, right, taking care of yourself. If you don't put a bedtime for yourself, I was such a hypocrite. I would tell my child and my daughter, you have to have a bedtime. You have to go to sleep exactly at this time. It's very important. Sleep is important. We all know how important sleep is. But I didn't have a bedtime. Exercise is important to me. By the way, I'm not saying it has to be important to you, but if it is important to you to take care of your physical health, Do you have that time on your schedule? And the same goes with work time. You see, most people love to do what's called reactive work. Reactive work is the time spent reacting to emails, reacting to messages, reacting to meetings, reacting all day long. And they like doing that kind of work because it's cognitively easy, right? I don't know what to do. Let me check some email. I'm not really sure how to spend my time. Let me call a meeting, right? That's what most people do all day. But that's not where real work gets done. Real work gets done doing reflective work. Of course, some of your day needs to be spent doing reactive work, but some of your day also needs to be spent doing reflective work. Reflective work is the kind of work that we can only do without distraction. The thinking, being creative, that can only happen not in 30-second spurts throughout your day, but only when we sit down and work in traction, right? Without any distraction. So that time has to be scheduled as well, or it's not going to happen.
Wow. Love it. I was thinking, um, you said before, the whole thing that before social media was video games, and before video games was the TV, and before the TV was the radio, and so on and so forth. Uh, so my question is, sometimes I read these articles, and blog posts about the digital natives. So the addiction they have with the phones, the addiction they have with social media. And I'm wondering, is there a real problem, or is just us, older people that don't really understand what's going on with them and their relationship with social media, with phone, the same way they didn't understand our relationship with video games
Yeah.
in the past. So is there a real problem, or it's just the way they are going to use technology, and this is be the new normal in 20 years, in 30 years?
Yeah. So there's a lot of clickbait out there, right? That when we see, anytime you see a story in the legacy media, right, in the big forms of media that criticizes new media, we should be a little skeptical. Like, look into the studies. And what we typically find is that there are some adverse effects, right? If anybody listening out there feels like, oh, I spend too much time on social media, or I spend too much time playing video games, hey, I'm not going to argue with you. That's why I wrote Indistractable, is to help you cut back, is to help you manage the time the way you want to spend your time and attention, not the way the tech companies want you to. But this moral panic that people's brains are being hijacked, that everyone is addicted, this is ridiculous. Now, some people are addicted, right? Because some people get addicted to all kinds of stuff, right? I was just in Italy recently, and my God, the wine is amazing. But is every Italian that drinks wine an alcoholic? Wine, I promise you, is much, much more addictive. Alcohol is way more addictive than social media. But no, you can have a Chianti or as a beautiful glass of wine with dinner, and you're not an alcoholic, even though it's potentially addictive. Well, yeah, some people are alcoholics, just like some people are probably addicted to social media, but not everybody, not even close. All right. And so what we need to do is to separate the people who actually have the problem of addiction. Addiction is a disease, it's a pathology, and it requires special attention, from everybody else. So 99 to 95% of us, we're not addicted. We're distracted. But why do you hear this narrative so much? Why is the media trying to convince us that we're addicted? Because we love that narrative, right? When there's an addiction, there's a dealer, there's a pusher, there's someone I can blame, right? They're doing it to me. It's not my fault, right? The drug dealer is doing it to me. I don't have to take responsibility, but it's not an addiction. It's just a distraction. But when you call it a distraction, that's no fun. Now I got to do something about it. And people don't want to hear that.
So just to go back to my question, so this could be actually the new normal for the new generations. I mean, they just have a different relationship with technology that we had in the past, especially with mobile phones, with social media, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, every new technology changes society, especially a technology as vast as the internet or social media, right? Sophocles, the Greek philosopher, said, "Nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse." Paul Virilio said that when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. every new technology is going to reshape our lives, right? If on such a massive scale. And of course, it's going to have good sides and bad sides, right? That when the car was invented, we got car accidents, and it reshaped our lives, right? Everybody now who's born since the time of Henry Ford, our lives are very, very different than the lives of people who existed before the car. I don't want to go back to the time before the car. The car makes our life way better. But of course, we have to learn to drive. And I think we are in this stage right now where we are learning, hey, how do we use these tools appropriately? How can we make sure that we get the best of them without letting them get the best of us? Because by the way, we need to also acknowledge that the good, the job of the media is to scare us. That's how they make money, right? If it bleeds, it leads. I went to journalism school. That's the first rule of journalism. If it bleeds, it leads. So of course, when you watch television or read the newspaper, they hate social media because it's competition. So they tell you all the bad stuff. They don't tell you all the good stuff. They don't tell you the fact that all the things that used to hurt teenagers are at record lows, with one exception. In a particular country, in America, teenage suicide has gone up. But outside of the English-speaking world, everywhere else, the things that harm teenagers are at record lows. Teen pregnancy, teen smoking, teen drug use, teen car accidents, teen homicide. All these things are at record lows. Why? Maybe, I don't know, but maybe one hypothesis, if we're going to say, well, all these bad things are happening because of technology, what if many of the good things are happening because of technology? If you wanted to find a way to keep teenagers indoors, off the streets, safe, maybe, especially during a pandemic, for God's sakes, maybe these devices are not such a bad idea after all. So again, I'm not saying there aren't downsides to these technologies. Of course, overuse is a problem. If somebody's overusing, and I wrote a whole book on how we can make sure that we use it the right way. But we also need to acknowledge there's a lot of upsides to these things as well. I mean, look, what's happening right now in Iran. Couldn't happen without social media. Me Too couldn't have happened without social media. Black Lives Matter couldn't have happened without social media. The Arab Spring couldn't have happened with social media. Getting information into Russia about Ukraine couldn't happen without social media. We need this stuff. This is amazing, wonderful technology. Yeah, you know what, folks? We have to learn how to use it. Okay, turn off your goddamn notifications once in a while and be with your kids. Is it that hard? Right? We complain so much about, all these things are happening, being done to me. My brain is being hijacked. Come on, use the tools. They're all right there. We just have to stop complaining and do something about it. Not that it's easy, right? If I lost a bunch of weight. I used to be clinically obese, and at 44, I'm in the best shape of my life. But it's hard. I want to eat chocolate cake all day, right? When I was in Italy, oh my God, your food is freaking amazing. Between the pasta and the all the amazing desserts, the tiramisu, all I want to do is eat all day. But I have to have some self-control too, right? Or I'm going to blow up if I eat too much. So I had to learn how to do that. And by the way, it's the same principles that I said earlier. Time management is pain management. Well, guess what? Weight management is pain management. It's controlling our urges. Money management is pain management, because all human behavior is about a desire to escape discomfort. So if we don't understand how to deal with those feelings, we're going to be beholden to them.
I want to go back to the framework for a moment. One of my favorite chapter in the book is also one of my favorite quote of the book is control the input, not the outcome. And most of the time we focus on the outcome in every aspect of our life, in, I don't know, going to the gym, in our career, in our relationship and whatever. What do you mean by that? Control the input, not the outcome. Can you tell us a bit more?
Sure. So the most popular productivity technique out there, and one that I used to follow for many, many years, is keeping a to-do list. And it wasn't until I really dove into the research that I found that this is actually a terrible technique, at least the way most people do it. Now, to clarify, getting things out of your head and onto a piece of paper, onto an app, great idea. But most people don't realize that that's just the first step. That if that's all you do, if you put this list of to-dos and then you run your life based on how many cute little check marks you get in a day, that's a terrible productivity tool. That this is something that we perpetuate, but it's actually, if you look at the research, is actually awful for our personal productivity. Why? There's a few reasons. Number one, to-do lists that measure outcomes, right? To-do lists are all about outcomes. I want to finish doing this, finish doing that, write that proposal, check all my emails, finish my book, raise my kid, write a novel, right? We have all these things that we put on to-do lists, but there's no constraint. There's no constraint, right? A to-do list is limitless. And now we have, it used to be you had a piece of paper. Okay, when you got to the end of the paper, it's time to reassess. Now with, apps, you can have infinite to-do lists. So why is this so harmful? Because you can never do all of the things on that to-do list, right? When you measure the outcome, you're not going to finish. So what happens? You get home from work at the end of the day. You've worked real hard. You feel exhausted. You look at this to-do list and it confronts you with all the things that you promised you do that you didn't. Loser, right? So day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, you're reinforcing your self-image as someone who doesn't do what they say they're going to do. And that begins to take a real psychic toll. You start hearing people say, oh, I'm no good at time management. I have a short attention span. Oh, you see, I'm a Sagittarius. That's why. And it's ridiculous. There's nothing broken about you. It's that you're using this outdated, stupid technique. That what we have to do instead is to impose a constraint. What's the constraint? Well, what's our resource? What's the input, right? If you went to a baker and you said, hey, I need 100 loaves of bread. I'm having a wedding. I need 100 loaves of bread. The baker would say, okay, here's the input. I'm going to need flour. I'm going to need salt. I'm going to need yeast. I'm going to need sugar. I'm going to need all these ingredients to make the bread, right? Well, that's common sense when it comes to a baker. But when it comes to knowledge workers, when it comes to people, white collar workers, what's our input? We know what our output is. Our output is creative work. But what's the input? The input is only two things. We don't make, bread with flour and salt and yeast. We make creative output with time and attention. That's it. Time and attention. So what that means is that you have to plan for the input. Just like the baker has to plan for his ingredients, you have to plan the time and attention on your schedule. And you measure yourself not by how many things you finished, because what happens is you start gaming it, right? You start doing the easy stuff. You start doing the urgent stuff as opposed to the really important stuff. So by planning out your time and attention, what you're going to do is to measure yourself by one thing only. And that one thing is, did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? I don't care if you finish. Did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? Why? Turns out studies find that people who measure themselves based on that one metric and that metric alone, doesn't matter if they finish, they actually finish more. They actually get more done than the people who measure themselves by how many cute little boxes they checked off. Why? Because they have a feedback system, right? When you have a to-do list and you have a million things that you have to do, what people tend to do is they say, they work on this for 5 minutes. Oh, that gets a little difficult. Let me just do this for another 10 minutes. And then I'm going to do that for 3 minutes. And they're so scatterbrained, they can't focus on one thing until completion, right? So by splitting their time up this way, they don't actually do the work they have to do in any reasonable fashion. Whereas the people who say, I'm just going to focus on this task, even if it's for 15, 20 minutes, I'm just going to do this and nothing else. They learn over time, okay, in 20 minutes, I got 5% done. Okay, well, that means I'm going to need 20 more increments of 5 minutes in order to finish the entire task, right? So by doing that, you get feedback. Whereas with a to-do list, you get none. The other reason it's so bad for you, we talked about how there's no feedback system. We talked about what it does to your self-image. Another big reason is that to-do lists, the irony is that there's this fact that when you simply keep your life on a to-do list, when you measure your self-worth by how many boxes you check off, by simply the output rather than the input, you don't actually even enjoy the time you have off, right? That what we see with, I call this the tyranny of the to-do list, that this was the case that I had all the time, that even when I just wanted to relax, I wanted to watch some Netflix, I wanted to play video games, I wanted to go out with my friends, I wanted to be with my daughter, I was always thinking about, oh, and I have a million things still left on my to-do list. And so even when I plan time to have fun, even when I have a leisure time, I didn't really enjoy it because I had this million item list I still didn't finish. Whereas now, with this technique that I talk about in Indistractable of time boxing, the thing I am doing is exactly what I need to be doing. Everything else, even doing work, would now be a distraction, because if I plan time to be with my daughter, if I plan time to be with my friends, that's traction. That's the only thing I need to be doing in that time and place. And so that's why time boxing is way better than keeping a to-do list, and why measuring the input is much more important than measuring the output.
I love it, and I was a huge fan of to-do list before reading your book, so that's why I
Sorry, I
asked
ruined
you
that for
this
you.
question.
And again, it's not that to-do lists are bad. It's that
Yeah,
it's not the end. That's the first step.
yeah,
Getting
yeah.
things down in to-do list is the first step. Then you've got to put it into a time box.
I think that the thing here, the main suggestion is focus on the process, not just the outcome. So
Right.
that's how, at least that's how I changed my relationship with to-do list.
Mhm.
I was also curious to know, what's your relationship with emails and with push notifications? Do you have
Mhm.
any tips?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a whole section in the book on how to hack back these external triggers, and one of them is emails. There's another small section on notifications. So I only leave on notifications that someone would need to contact me in an emergency. Okay, so I don't have notifications for WhatsApp, because if my house was on fire, somebody's not going to email me, they're not going to WhatsApp me, they're going to call me, right? They're going to maybe text me. They're not going to, Facebook message me if there's something really, really urgent and important. So I only have those on, and even those, there's wonderful features that come with everybody's phone these days. For one of the features that I use all the time is called "Do Not Disturb While Driving." That then this feature now is on Google phone, on Android phones, it's on iPhones. Everybody has it now. Basically, the idea is, if you plan the time to be indistractable, and many people say, well, what if somebody needs me? What if there's an emergency? My kid's sick at school. What do I do? Well, there's this beautiful feature that when you engage, if someone calls or texts you, when this feature is engaged, they get an automatic message that says, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. If this is urgent, text the word urgent. Okay, it's meant for driving, but they don't need to know you're not driving. It says, I'm driving right now. I can't talk. If this is urgent, text me with the word urgent. I use it. My message says you can customize it. My message says I'm indistractable, but if this is urgent, text the word urgent. And all they have to do is type the word urgent. And if they put that word in, then the message will come through. And I've used this technique now for several years, and nobody ever sends urgent because it can wait. But almost always, 99% of the time, when people say, "Oh, but what if somebody needs me?" It's not reality. It's a
Yeah,
fear. It's not it's fake. It's just a feeling that someone might need us, right? That's why it's an internal trigger. It's that myth, that devil on our shoulder, that is creating this uncertainty, this fear, this doubt, this stress that we're responding to. It's not the actual need, and so that's why it's so important to understand this concept of internal triggers. And this is how we manage our notifications.
yeah. uh, Everyone, I think, said that at least once, but what if something is urgent? But it never is. I mean, 99% of the time, it's not
It almost
just
never
not
is.
real. It's not gonna happen.
And leave that channel open, right? If it's super important to you,
Yeah,
okay, turn off all the notifications except for your phone, right? If your
yeah,
house is on fire, they'll call you. They're not
yeah,
going to Facebook message you.
yeah. Just out of curiosity, uh, what are you working right now? Do you have a new book idea?
I've got lots of ideas. So I write books based on problems that I have in my own life. So I write books for me more than anyone. So when I was looking for how do you build habit forming products, I didn't find a book that answered that question. And when I was trying to figure out how to manage my distraction, I read all the books on the topic, and none of them worked for me. And so I decided to figure this out for myself by really going into the research and seeing what the science says about these topics. So the good news is I'm never short of topics, because the bad news is that I have lots of problems. And so I'm always looking for how to solve my own problems. I'm far from perfect, so I'm always looking for solutions out there. Many times there are good books that address a topic, but sometimes I come across a topic that just hasn't been addressed very well. So I've got a few things I'm working on, but nothing ready to announce yet.
Cool. And speaking of books, we usually end these interviews with book suggestions and tool suggestions. So, uh, do you have any great books that you are reading right now, or that you have read in the last, let's say, couple of months, in the last year, that you want to suggest to my audience?
So a book that I really enjoyed, it's I read it a while ago, maybe about a year ago, I guess, is called Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. Wonderful book. Rory
Oh,
Sutherland at Ogilvy. He's fantastic. He's just a great guy to watch and listen to. If you've never seen a Rory Sutherland talk, then definitely YouTube it. It's fantastic. But his book is just as witty, just as funny, and just as deep as he is. It basically talks about, well, you just have to read it for yourself. Alchemy. It's a wonderful, wonderful book.
yeah, I leave the link in the description. And I think you are the second guest in this podcast that said alchemy when I asked about book suggestion. And what about tools? In your book, you suggest a few tools also that can help us being indistractable. That you said there's something that you want to tell us now.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of tools I use, and there's the book is full of both the practical tools, but more important, the tool itself is the theory, right? Strategy is sorry, tools are the tactics are what you do. Strategy is why you do it. So the same goes with tools. If I just tell you, hey, use this tool, if you don't understand why that tool is important to use, it's not going to be useful for very long. But that being said, there are a few tools that I use every day. One of my favorite tools that I use is called Pocket. So I have a rule that I never read articles on the website. Because what I find is I really enjoy reading articles, but these articles, whether it's at the New York Times or the Atlantic or wherever you might read articles, Medium, they are designed to get you to read one article and the next article and the next article, and they're never going to tell you, hey, you've had enough, right? They're never going to say, hey, go have a life. So I would fall into this content consumption vortex. And so I made this rule. I don't read articles on a web page. I only listen to them on my phone. And then the way I do this is I use a tool called Pocket. I don't have any affiliation with the company or anything, but basically it's a little Chrome extension. You hit a button, it sends the text of the article to this app. So you can either read it later. What I do is I have another app called Voice Dream, and Voice Dream takes those articles from Pocket, which have been stripped of all the advertising and all the clickbait that's meant to keep you on those sites, and just reads the article to you. So what this does, it uses a technique called temptation bundling. And what this does is essentially you're using a reward from one area of your life to help incentivize you to do something else in another area of your life. So my rule is I can only listen to these articles when I'm exercising. So when I'm taking a walk, when I'm in the gym, that's when I get to listen to these articles. So not only do I save the time of not scrolling endlessly online, consuming content, but I'm also incentivizing myself to go exercise or to go take a walk of some kind or do something physical by listening to these articles as well. So Pocket and Voice Stream together is a wonderful tool.
Wow, great combination. Nir, where they can read you, find you, follow you?
Sure. Yeah. So my website is nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, Nir and far.com. And if you go to indistractable.com, there's an 80-page workbook that anyone can download for free. It's completely complimentary. We couldn't fit it into the final edition of the book, so we made it available to anyone online. And that again is at indistractable.com. It's IN, the word distract, ABLE.com.
Great. All the links are in the description. Nir, thank you so much for your time and for these talks. It was inspiring and full of great tips and insight. Thanks so
I
much.
appreciate it.
It
Thanks
was
so much
great.
for having me.